Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to another tropical forecast here by Age Weather Forecast. And we have a pretty big update here on the tropics for the North Atlantic. Invest 95L has now become potential tropical cyclone 7. So that means we do have advisories coming out from the National Hurricane Center for PTC7. Definitely keeping a very close eye on for portions of the Caribbean. As well, Fred continues to stay as a tropical depression as it did make landfall in Cuba unexpectedly earlier today, so its LLC is basically undefined, and there most likely is no LLC whatsoever. And this storm is continuing to just look worse by the minute. Overall confidence for even it becoming a 50 to even 60-mile-an-hour tropical storm back in the Gulf of Mexico is decreasing as well. So Fred is definitely losing a lot of its hope here, but still likely becoming a tropical storm once it goes back into the warmer portion of the Gulf of Mexico. A 45-mile-an-hour peak is expected. So let's now get an actual look here in the actual description for tropical depression Fred. As you do see, there it is at 35 miles an hour, so it really hasn't significantly weakened much more. Still basically moving west northwest at 12 miles an hour. So it looks like now it's going to start getting out of its way of Cuba, but it did officially make landfall. The low pressure, the surface low, was actually over Cuba. Earlier today, and minimal center pressure of 1,013 millibars. Here's a look here at actually PTC7. We've had quite a bit of PTCs this year. This may be our fourth or no, I think this is our third or fourth PTC this whole year. So maximum sustained winds obviously at 35 miles an hour. So this is actually the same strength at this moment as Fred. And here you see minimal center pressure just under or just above Fred at 1,010 millibars, and it is moving quite quickly at west at 21 miles an hour. However, it is expected to slow down as it gets closer towards Hispaniola and the Greater Antilles. And then we see formation probability for the next 48 hours and 5 days are both 80%. So overall, I think this will definitely most likely become Tropical Storm Grace, and I would not rule out the possibility that this does become a hurricane. I would not rule it out. Maybe a weak Category 1. Obviously, there's been a lot of interesting runs, such as the H-Wharf, and especially the GFS 6Z was extremely interesting what they showed. Like Category 3, low in Category 3, hitting the Outer Banks or something like that. But that's definitely not going to happen. However, I do think there's a chance it could get up to maybe 75 miles an hour, maybe 80 miles an hour. But that's very peak, and obviously that is very far out to say. However, hurricane can't be ruled out with this, and I think it could definitely become more significant than Fred. So here's a look at the actual PTC7 on satellite imagery, and the thing actually looks pretty darn good. Obviously, a widespread amount of convection. Obviously, I mean, this definitely does look pretty good considering it was an IMBES earlier today, and now it's a PTC. But this thing's looking it's looking pretty good. Obviously, this is going to be getting close to the Leeward Islands, and it's obviously going to affect them within around 48-ish hours or so. Not the exact timing really, which I'll be talking about very soon, but that's exactly why it is a PTC, because it is posing a threat towards portions of the Leeward Islands, and obviously things looking pretty good. We see a good amount as well convection kind of all the way up towards the north central portion there. This low pressure is kind of right to the north of the actual latest convection burst we see down here, so we are seeing some gradual development of some thunderstorms and overall higher cold cloud tops there with very good convection, which we're about to look at right now. But overall, things looking pretty good. You can obviously see there is counterclockwise spin and vorticity within this low pressure. However, we have to get it defined low level circulation and actually make sure this low is close before it is named as a tropical depression. Right now, there is no defined LLC. However, that can very well change within the next 12 or 18 hours. This thing could definitely become a tropical depression, possibly by as late as 11 o'clock tonight, maybe as late or as early as tomorrow in the early morning hours. But 12 to 18 hours is basically being generous just in case there is no LLC that's found today. However, I think this could definitely be named a tropical depression as early as less than 12 hours or so. But it's looking pretty good at the moment. Getting a lot of convection overall. I mean, there's really not much to really hate on the system right now. It's looking pretty good. And it's obviously going to continue to gain a lot of convection, gain a lot more structure, and overall, at some points, we're probably going to start seeing more widespread convection bursts, maybe even during a maximum later tonight. But overall, not looking at awful whatsoever. So here's a look at the actual IR, looking at the actual convection. You can see a lot of convection as well. A good amount of lightning strikes there, centered towards specifically the eastern portion of the area of convection. Obviously, the low pressure is mainly just to the north of the actual main convection burst. It's basically located around, I believe, 51 degrees west, or around there, that general region there. But a decent amount of convection. It looks like there is going to be maybe a new area of low pressure relocation, most likely, because you see a lot of convection kind of more towards the western region is starting to die out a little bit, and it's kind of centering towards a specific area. So it looks like we're getting overall a new area convection burst and possibly a new area or new relocation. I guess you could say. That took me a while to get that out of my mouth, but it's definitely looking pretty good overall. It looks like it's going to go through relocation. We're going to start seeing new area convection bursts. While we see a lot of that convection start to die off a little bit here, and less initiation and more initiation centered to the area actually near the low. So here's a look here at the actual visible on tropical depression Fred, and it's just looking absolutely awful. Obviously, there's really no area of low circulation. I mean, obviously, it did make landfall across portions of Cuba, and it's just scattered thunderstorms really with 35 miles an hour and into the tropical depression. But obviously, good thing is it's going to start getting out of Cuba. I mean, it's gone through a lot of land interaction within this general vicinity here. Obviously, within the past 36 hours, however, it's likely to go back out to the warm Mars as it goes west-northwestward and head into the warm areas in the warm portions of the Gulf of Mexico. So let's now get a look here at the actual forecast. Is obviously the first advisory. Actually, no, I believe this is the this is the I think this is the second advisory actually, because it became officially a PTC at I think 11ish Eastern time. So this is the second advisory actually, I believe so, on PTC7. So here's a look at the actual forecast map by the National Hurricane Center, and as you can see, it's not the fastest moving storm. Obviously, it is now moving 21 miles an hour westward. However, as you can see, it dramatically slows down, specifically just south of Puerto Rico and as well Dominican Republic. So we could definitely see a pretty significant flooding threat, considering that they just got a lot of rain from Fred. So overall, seeing a good amount of flooding threats there, obviously, as well as Lieutenant Prone. Another big threat for mudslides. However, again, still some wind damage is expected. But looking at a tropical storm possibly by tomorrow early morning. So we may actually get grace extremely soon here, actually. And obviously, that's exactly why I think this could definitely become a very, very interesting storm here. Because obviously, if it does become a tropical storm quite soon, they're far east of the Lesser Antilles, and considering it has to start slowing down just before the really warm Mars, they're off the Hispaniola region, I think it could definitely get to a decent strength here, and as well, I wouldn't even let the possibility of it really re-strengthening up here, because a lot of models have been taking it up here. Look at the GFS, obviously, way up there at Category 3. But overall, I think this storm could definitely be very interesting here. Tropical storm watches are ready for portions there of the Leeward Islands and as well the U.S. Virgin Islands. Expected to continue to be a tropical storm just skinning portions of Puerto Rico and as well making landfall right exactly where Fred made landfall in far eastern Dominican Republic. And they're going to continue to stay as a tropical storm as it goes through all Hispaniola and goes dramatically to a northwest turn. So looking at a big threat, or not a big threat, but looking at a threat overall for a portion of Florida and the Bahamas. So overall, you kind of see similar areas that got hit by Fred. Obviously, specifically this region almost got hit dead on, specifically eastern Hispaniola. So they're about to get hit by another tropical storm, possibly more intense tropical storm. So overall, keeping a very, very close eye on this. So let's actually get a look at the actual advisory update on the actual wind speed and the max wind speed. So obviously, initially, right now, it's still at 35 miles an hour at a PTC. However, in 12 hours, they expected to stay at 35 miles an hour, but become a tropical depression. So we're looking at a tropical depression, like I said, within 12 hours. And I wouldn't even run the possibility if it becomes a tropical depression as early as the next 6 hours. I mean, I'm talking possibly by the 11 o'clock update, we can easily see a tropical depression. And it looked like there has been an LLC. ASCET hasn't gone in there a while. However, it looked like there was a well-defined low-level circulation. In the next 24 hours, obviously, we may see, or actually within less than 24 hours, we may see, obviously, it becoming 40 miles an hour. 40 miles an hour again, 36 hours. And then looking at the peak here, peak forecast is within 3 days, just over Hispaniola. So this looks like this will be mainly just before it continues to go into Hispaniola. So it looks like this is going to be 70, or it looks like it's going to be 50 hours, not 50 hours, sorry, 50 miles an hour. wanted actually just before the actual landfall. So I think that's exactly where I was saying it's going to be moving quite slowly. So I think it could definitely be quite interesting for Dominican Republic and Hispaniola because obviously they just got a good amount of rain from Fred, even though it was very weak. However, I think it could definitely be stronger than 50 miles an hour before Hispaniola. I honestly think it can get near 60. And the conditions are looking pretty conducive overall. It's got a long track. Won't really see much land that will actually really mess it up for a while actually. So it's definitely quite interesting what we're looking at right now because I think 50 is definitely I guess a decent peak for the initial for the initial forecast or the first or second advisory. However, it's definitely looking like we could definitely get this to be a tropical depression very soon. Like I said, I think it could definitely become a tropical depression sooner than the next 12 hours. It could easily. I mean, I wouldn't even rule the possibility if it becomes a tropical depression by 5 o'clock. Um, I know that was a pretty big change from 11 o'clock to 5 o'clock. However, like I said, it's looking pretty good right now. In satellite imagery, there's a good amount of low circulation, so I think it could definitely become a tropical depression, even by the 5 o'clock advisory. At this point, still initially at 35 miles an hour. So I would not doubt we even get tropical depression 7 by the next few minutes here. I'm not sure when the next advisory comes out, but it could definitely become a tropical depression by 5 o'clock. So here's a look here at the actual track guidance here. This is the 18Z. Um, Outlook from obviously many computer model tracks, but here's a look here at the actual tracks that we have of 18Z. So you see there's a lot of differences. We have a few, two, or a couple getting into a kind of what the GFS wanted at 0Z earlier, kind of taking toward the Bahamas, and it's exactly kind of what those models are showing. The majority, though, kind of have to do with what the National Hurricane Center wants, kind of going towards Hispaniola and portions of Hispaniola, or Hispaniola and portions of the Puerto Rico region. Then we have one kind of going straight down, which obviously won't happen. However, there is a little change here. Obviously, we kind of know it's going to go near Dominican Republic and that general region with the steering pattern. However, the thing is, does it go north like that towards Florida? Or does it continue going due west into the Gulf of Mexico? That's a pretty big question because obviously that could very well change a huge forecast whether Miami and the Bahamas should prepare or whether areas in the Gulf of Mexico should prepare. And if it were to go in the Gulf of Mexico, um, we'll obviously be talking about a pretty big storm here. But overall, this is a look at the tracks and the intensity at 18Z here. We have a few obviously getting to a tropical storm as early as the next 12 hours. So we could easily see a tropical storm possibly by the 5 a.m. update and maybe even the 8 a.m. update. So definitely going to be very interesting when we wake up to tomorrow morning. Looks like a peak here is the majority of the models coming at a peak at basically around 60-ish miles an hour with one or two or even three getting it to a hurricane. And then they have it kind of spinning as still kind of weak, but continue to stay as a tropical storm, mainly because of that land interaction. And actually, as we say that, look what happens. The 5 o'clock update came out in the middle of my video, and we have a little guy right here. Tropical Depression 7. That's definitely quite interesting here. It has now moving at 22 miles an hour westward. Again, like I did say, it's expected to slow down. But they're just 35 miles an hour and 1,010 millibars. Here's a latest look. Oops, that's the wrong one. Here's a latest map here, the latest cone at 5 o'clock p.m. And there you see tropical storm watches now issued for portions of Puerto Rico, looking at 60 miles an hour, or not, sorry, not 60 miles an hour. I'll show you guys the actual advisory discussion for peak forecast. However, like I did say, it's going to really slow down. Once it actually passes the Lesser Antilles, it will definitely slow down a good bit. And it's obviously going to be leading a pretty big threat for flooding, like I continue to say. And tropical storm watches are now issued for portions of Puerto Rico as well. The cone has looks like there's a lot less of an intense northwestern turn, so it looks like a pretty big threat for portions of Miami, Florida, and as well for portions of just overall south central and southeastern and even southwestern Florida. So definitely a pretty big threat there. However, it's going to put it a lot closer and obviously a lot more inland into Haiti, Dominican Republic, and as well more inland into actually portions of Cuba. So overall, just keeping a very close eye on that. But however, looking at a pretty big threat though for a lot of the majority of these areas here. And if it actually does continue to relocate further southward, we may see this go end up going into the Gulf of Mexico, which is definitely be very interesting. So here's the latest look here now at the tropical depression now, newly obviously confirmed tropical depression. 7 is now looking at a peak here at 50 miles an hour still, however, for a bit longer now. So there you see 40 miles an hour for the next 12 hours instead of it getting to 35, and obviously continue to see 45 there, 36 hours, 50 miles an hour for both 48 hours and 60 hours, and then 45 over Hispaniola. So they obviously did take down the 50 before or over Hispaniola, and then back to 40 over water, and then 120 hours back to 45. So a strengthening trend as it goes out of the Hispaniola region. So overall, definitely interesting here. They did make the 50-mile peak an extra 12 hours long, but they did not really increase it whatsoever. Again, looking at rainfall impacts over Haiti and Turks and Caicos, and obviously across Cuba and the Bahamas region, as well looking at flash flooding and urban flash flooding across Puerto Rico and portions of Hispaniola, of course, as they have already gotten a ton of rain from Fred. So definitely looking at some significant flooding from this. So here's the latest look, actually the 5 p.m. advisory now for Fred. And actually it looks pretty darn interesting here now. The tropical storm warnings continue to become more widespread across portions of southern Florida. Again, we do have tropical storm warnings now for the Keys of Florida. They were initially tropical storm watches, but these watches have now pushed further up into portions of the west central coast of Florida there, further north of Naples. And as well, warnings are now located from all the way from areas near Key Largo down to areas like Dry Tortuga there on the far west portion of the Keys. So obviously expected to go out of Cuba back into the warm waters there, the very warm beginning of the Gulf Stream gyre there. And that's going to allow for some really warm waters to really be under this storm here. So it's going to allow for it to really strengthen as well. Going to be moving extremely, and I mean extremely slow across portions of the eastern Gulf of Mexico. So actually that's exactly why the National Hurricane Center did increase here the tropical storm peak for Fred has really increased for portions of Fred, or obviously for Fred for a landfall actually, which I'm about to show. As well, the actual landfall has pushed really far west actually, near the actual Destin Beach region and overall as well near the Fort Walton area. So actually, Mississippi and Alabama remained in the cone, and actually even Alabama remains into the 1 to 3 day cone, which is very interesting. And does actually allow for quite a big change here overall. So even watching out now, not longer for Tallahassee or Big Bend or really Apalachicola, but really what for the direct landfall wise near Destin Beach and Fort Walton. However, Tallahassee or not Tallahassee, but areas near Apalachicola and Panama City will still get hit quite hard as they will be right ahead of the northeast quadrant. And I was looking at this going to be tropical depression near Birmingham, and then becoming post-tropical for portions of Kentucky. So here's a look here at the actual forecast positions and max winds, and a lot has changed. Now a 60-mile-an-hour peak, and actually just a few minutes ago it was 45. So they increased the peak by 15 miles an hour, which is absolutely crazy. So there's a lot more confidence, according to the National Hurricane Center, that since things are going to be moving so slow across the eastern Gulf of Mexico in the very warm waters, deep ocean heat content, very little shear overall, and really not much to really watch out for. They really increased this peak here. So looking at 35 right now initially over land, still going to be over land for 12 hours or so, but then back over water in 24 hours or so, and that gets it back to a tropical storm status, and it stays kind of at 40, 44, 45, then at 50, and then it jumps from 50 to 60. Obviously you don't have 55 at all, but then it goes from 50 to 60, and then looking at the peak here for around 3 days or so. So it looks like both the peak for 90 for both TD7 and as well Fred will like be around the next 3 days or so, but going to be very interesting. Then it dramatically weakens up to 30 miles an hour there inland, and then becomes post-tropical as it goes further inland to the Ohio Valley. So let's now get a look at the actual GFS 12Z here. Obviously 60 and 00 kind of showing some interesting scenarios here, and I believe as well 18Z, which is something very interesting as well. But all that, and guess what, guys? GFS no longer has 95L becoming a major hurricane, a tropical storm, or even a tropical depression. And it's obviously a tropical depression right now. I refer to it as 95L. I don't know why. I'm so used to being, I don't even refer to it as a PTC. I just refer to it as an invest right now. So obviously now GFS no longer shows anything at all for TD7. So I think 18Z is not going to pick up on it either, because obviously it's going to come out very soon. However, I think by 0Z and 6Z, GFS and the model will start obviously showing it since it's already a tropical depression. But GFS was to have Fred get to around 1,006, maybe 1,007 millibars before hitting portions of Apalachicola and portions of Panama. But again, 12Z is going to be really, obviously, very untrustworthy within this right now. Like I did say, there's going to be really no really threats towards dry air for both TD7 and really Fred. I guess you could say that Fred's going to obviously have a lot of moisture kind of around the actual load itself, so it shouldn't really be an issue. Actually, guys, hold on really 1 second. Let me actually end this real quick. Sorry, I was getting a Discord call. But there you see a good amount of moisture there across portions of Cuba and Florida. That's exactly where we have Fred, obviously. And then we see, if we go further back a little bit, you guys can kind of see that is exactly right here where we have Tropical Depression 7. So obviously, although there's a ton of dry air, as well as strong, really strong high pressure, we're in an extreme amount of dry air that's obviously kind of making its way towards the actually area of monsoon wave, where we have obviously TD7. It's not going to actually get to the 2 TD7 and actually affect it because we have a lot of moisture off portions of South America, which obviously helped Fred form as well. So we're going to be seeing as well the same kind of scenario that moisture is going to really boost up the moisture bubble of TD7. It's going to really allow it to get its act together. And obviously, it looks like the GFS is trending towards a lot of moisture here, actually into the Gulf of Mexico and as well near the Bahamas. So maybe they may take that storm there, or maybe in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. That's exactly where they take that moisture. They don't really have much moisture really going up the east coast like they used to, or near the southeast coast. So I think it's overall pretty interesting what they have so far. Let's actually now go back and see what we have so far. Oops, I did not want to click that. Let's go back to see what they have with the CMC. So CMC as well. This is look at the 12Z. I've actually not really gonna look at the 12Z. I believe they're not really showing much as well. They still have 1,012 millibars there for TD7, but they really don't have much with it. Actually, they just continue to show it just the area of low and trough, but not actually formation. And then CMC still taking it around 1,004 millibars. Fred for portion of Pensacola and the portions obviously of Dixie Alley may get some good amount of rain. Georgia and Alabama will need some much needed rain. Let's now get a look here at what the icon is showing. This is actually the 18Z icon, so obviously this should be pretty accurate, or at least a little bit more accurate than what the 12Z GFS is showing, since it's actually kind of coming out already just after the update. So icon actually wants to have actually portioned, let's see here, with the next around just under 3 days or so, have Fred at 1,006 millibars, and actually they do have they still have that low there for, they actually have the low for TD7, but they really don't have it forming really at all, even though this thing has already formed. Let's actually look at the actually 12Z icon, because obviously right now the ATC is not fully out. It's only around 66 hours out, so we want to get a better idea of what they were showing for Fred and actually location. So kind of taking it towards the Pensacola region and Fort Walton around 1,009 millibars. So not really much different. Actually, the thing is, Icon did want a pretty good storm though for Florida from I remember in 12Z, I believe Icon, if there you see Icon was really showing possibly a mid-end tropical storm for near West Palm Beach and portions there of Florida from TD7. So they were showing something very interesting though. We will have to see and wait for 18Z to see if that continues to verify or that continues to become a quote-unquote trend. GFS again not showing much vorticity at all within these systems. Obviously, they do have so that vorticity obviously increasing within Fred, but they really don't have much anything with 95L, or not 95L, sorry, with TD7 anymore. The H warp is really going quite crazy within this system here. And so actually the H warp has at around 1,005 millibars just before the Lesser Sea's landfall, and getting to a 999 just over the actual Leeward Islands there, and just near the portion of the U.S. Virgin Islands. And then 996 millibars within 54 hours, 992 within 60 hours, 972. So this thing really rapidly intensifies according to DH Warp. You're actually bringing a very intense rainfall as well, possibly some intense winds for Puerto Rico. Obviously, this will not happen. This is worst case scenario. However, I do think this could definitely have a shot to become a hurricane, and as well really look at, I mean, this would just be really unneeded at all. If we see this much rain once again for Dominican Republic, Hispaniola, and Puerto Rico just after Fred, that would definitely be something we do not want at all. But getting it up to around 977 millibars or 972 millibars for peak here, which is just around 72 hours, which is exactly what models were showing actually peak. Or that's what the National Hurricane was saying, peak there of 50 miles an hour before Hispaniola. The actual winds, though, actually getting to a pretty small wind field, but having it, let's see here, at 97 knots. So basically, I mean, that's basically just around Category 3. It's borderline Category 3 and Category 2, but really interesting what the H4 was hinting there. Just look at the HMON as well. HMON was having a lot less of an intense rapid intensification. However, they did getting up to around 1,008 millibars, 1,007 millibars, and that's kind of what the HMON is really showing. Nothing really much interesting there. As well, it's going to be quite a weird track here for TD7. Obviously, there's a lot of possibility within the ridge that it goes maybe all the way up here near Carolinas and Southeast. It goes maybe due west like this into the Gulf of Mexico. It kind of does maybe like this, like a lower track. I mean, it's really uncertain right now, but the ridge right now is really showing some good easterly winds kind of favoring something to go west-northwest, where it's basically exactly kind of where it's going at the moment. Obviously, this is kind of located within the actual trough area, so it's kind of going due west at the moment. Really not much flow or anything steering it. However, once it actually goes further into the actual area of Puerto Rico and the Lesser Antilles and Greater Antilles as well, it's going to kind of get steered further to a more sharper west-northwest turn instead of western turn. And then obviously the possibility it may or may not have a good steering for going directly around up the coast near Florida, near Georgia. I mean, it's really going to be something very interesting and something obviously very, very uncertain.